Welcome to YogiViews, where my guest is yoga itself, through interviewing those who practice it, teach it, sell it, or simply love it. I am Antonio Sausis. This is the second part of a two-part show where I'm interviewing Maria Alfaro. Maria is a native Italian living in Santa Cruz, California. She has studied yoga with Rodney Yee, Anna Forrest, and Scott Blossom, and is also trained in Tai Chi and Qigong. Her training in trauma release exercises, or TRE, with his founder, bioenergetic therapist David Berceli, led her to create Yoga and TRE, a workshop that is preparatory for the practice of TRE, but also Neurogenic Yoga, an integrative method that combines the healing benefits of yoga with Dr. Berceli's developments of neurogenic tremors. Having defined TRE and how you have used yoga to prepare for TRE, but then you've moved to creating this neurogenic yoga where, if I'm not wrong, you're using some of the yoga postures actually as the triggers for the tremors. So tell me about that form of yoga, or that
Neurogenic yoga.
Yes.
So so neurogenic yoga is important to understand. It's not a new style of yoga, so it's not a new type of yoga. It's just a new method which helps us combining any kind of yoga with neurogenic tremors. The reason why we came up with it is because there is a great interest in the yoga world for this technique, for TRE. And the certification process for TRE, it requires two different levels. So to teach individual clients is level 1 with all the supervision and stuff. And then if you want to teach groups, which is what most yoga teachers do, you have to go through level 2 with all the supervision. So it's sort of time consuming and costly to do that. While we expect the yoga teachers, they already know how to teach yoga. And already know how to deal with groups. So basically the reason, because I've been practicing neurogenic yoga forever myself, before David asked me to come up with this program. Basically, instead of doing the exercises, I do yoga, and then I tremor. Because basically that's what it is. But
did it happen spontaneously in you? You were practicing yoga and you started
No,
trembling?
I was already practicing TRE, and then I got the idea, well, why, if I do my yoga practice, let's say, and then I'm done with my yoga practice, and let's say I practice for an hour, and then I have to do all the TRE exercises. So one day I thought, well, maybe I don't have to do that. I just do yoga and that's it. Because as I was saying, initially you have to fatigue yourself.
Yeah.
Eventually, now actually, personally, I don't have to do anything in order to tremor. I could tremor in 5 minutes because my body knows it. For the vast majority of people, they have to do something, okay? So this came up in order to reach a wider yoga community and give the teachers an opportunity to be certified in a more smooth and simpler way. Because instead of having to do all those trainings, they do one training. We do one supervision session after 2 months to see if they got it, and then they're good to go. And then we'll be able to spread the neurogenic tremors more widely and to everybody, because the yoga community, as you know, is by nature more open-minded and more ready to receive new and effective ideas in the area of healing.
Yes.
So David picked me, and by the way, there is 2 of us in this work. It's me and also my partner, Jenica Mills, and she lives in San Diego. And he picked us because we are both TRE trainers, meaning we we train teachers. And because we are both yogis. So when he had this idea, because he doesn't practice yoga, but he knows that this was something that was necessary to do, and so he asked us to design this program. So the program, basically, when we do a workshop, it's very simple. We use the yoga poses, and depending from the kind of class that we have in front of us, we will choose something more vigorous, on the vigorous side, or something that is more in the relaxation, stretching side, and it will still work. When we will do a training, what we want to teach to people is, to teachers, because those trainings, while the TRE training is open to everybody, the neurogenic yoga teacher training are only for yoga teachers. So we want to teach them the theory of the tremor, like in a training for TRE, but also we want to teach them how to use whatever style of yoga they are doing to induce the tremor. So let's say somebody does yoga for seniors, or it does power vinyasa, and everything in between has intensity and power, is all good, because the different body types that they're attracted to those classes will receive the work that they're used to, and then they will tremor. I hope it's clear.
Yes. And once you have created this neurogenic yoga, then the tremors are triggered by yoga poses. So you're not following actually the old model or the previous model of trauma releasing exercises, but actually you have come up with ways of triggering the tremor with yoga.
Yes. And then the final result is the same.
Yes.
Basically, you're lying on the ground and you tremor.
After the poses.
After the poses, yes.
And do those poses make everyone tremor, or do you have to adjust the poses according to who's your student?
Everybody tremor.
Everybody.
I don't know if you're familiar with the polyvagal theory of Stephen Porges.
But you please tell us. Yeah.
So, in 2 words, is about engagement and social connection. So it's the new development of the new ideas that they have on the nervous system. So in 2 words, in very simple, it's very important that the persons practicing and tremoring feel safe. So the job of the teacher is really to create a container, because again, this is a natural response. So everybody does it. But in order to do it, they have to feel safe. So it's the job of the teachers to make them feel that.
Because otherwise they will go into contraction again.
Exactly. So, and you do that by a little bit of mind food. You explain them what it is, because the curious mind want to know, so that they can trust the process. But then, let's say me, in this case, I create a container that is safe, and in which they can feel that they can relax. In one way, they understood what is about to go on and what is going to happen and why it's good for them, and they don't need to resist it. And in the other hand, there is a conversation that happens between bodies that is below the level of consciousness. Basically, it's our nervous system communicating with each other. So by modeling, a calm, confident, loving, cheerful. I'm known for my sense of humor, so like keeping it light and being present with them without being in the face. That's how you create this environment that allows the body to go into this natural response. The rest is really details. And also one thing that we explain people is like everybody has experienced this tremoring before, because every time, I don't know, when you get married and you are nervous at the altar, when you are, maybe you witness a car accident, then you pull over and you feel or you are in a car accident, you feel, or maybe you have to give a speech and you feel nervous, you have an exam, the cops pull you over because you're speeding. All those simple things that can happen in life, people experience this slight vibration, and then they shut it down because of the reason that we talked earlier. Because it doesn't look good.
Well, I'm even thinking of, because I have known of some, even some teachers, yoga teachers, that when this is a spontaneous happening in their students, they don't know what to do with it, and they ask their students to change the position so they stop with the tremors. So it's an interesting thing.
Well, that's unfortunate, yes.
That's unfortunate, but it happens, yes.
Oh, it happens in all kinds of settings. When women give birth, that's one of the most common thing for a woman. I have no kids, but it's the most common thing to tremor after, because it's a trauma. It's intense.
Yes.
And because they don't know what it is, in hospital especially, in the so-called primitive cultures, they actually support it because they recognize it and they're used to it. But in the so-called modern world, they actually tend to medicate the new mother so that she stops.
Or to go ahead with a C-section, and we avoid all the problems.
Oh no, but this is after, after she has the baby.
Oh, after she has had, I understand.
It's very common to go into a tremor
now.
response, and then they medicate them.
Yeah. Does this have any counterindication?
Well, being a natural response of the body, there is not so much as counterindication, but we talk more about cautions. For example, we don't teach pregnant women, not because we think it's bad, but because, you know, there is too much involved. If something goes wrong with her pregnancy, how can she know that it's not been the tremors? Also, we are careful about working with people that are taking medications. Not that they cannot do it, but they will. Basically, the rapid release in the muscle tissue can affect the way that you are absorbing medication. So they will need to work with the doctor and make sure that the doses that they are taking are right, because they might need some tweaking. And, you know, and then there are all the common sense with physical conditions. Of course, you know, like any other exercise or even with yoga, as a teacher, you have to ask your student or client what's going on with their body.
Yes.
And if they had, you know, injuries or surgeries. Basically, on the physical level, if they have the okay of their doctor to do any form of exercise, they would be good to go with this one. On the mental level, it could be more complicated because, again, it depends. This activity can create some, it's rare, but some emotional negative reaction can come up. And that's why it's important that the teacher is aware of what's going on.
Yes.
And also when we train people, we train them how to deal with this possible negative reaction so that they can reorganize the client and calm him down.
Yes.
And usually, I mean, it's very important to understand that it's not the tremors that bring up this reaction, but this interpretation of what's going on in the body that activates some memories that might be connected to some traumatic event.
Correct. Or also, I would think that because emotions live in the body, according to what parts are experiencing the tremors and how they do relate with them, while the tremors themselves might be geared towards relaxation and release of energy, if the tremors are making a part tremble that is related to certain emotions, then of course it can bring up those emotions.
That's totally, absolutely. And I cry often when I do this work. I mean, who doesn't have pain and grief and trauma? The idea is that, you know, like, it's totally fine and actually welcome to have emotions. The thing is they should remain in a manageable level. That's what we call self-regulation. So basically you navigate them in a way that is possible to integrate them in the present moment. Basically we don't want to freak out. Like when you're watching a movie, let's say I watch a movie, it's very sad, and I will cry because it's sad. And then the phone rings and you calling me for, oh yeah, Antonio, I will be happy to do this interview. Then I put it down, I go back to my movie, and I'm like, oh man, look what happened to her, you know. So I'm having emotions, I'm expressing my emotions, but I'm in my body. There's nothing wrong with emotions. And people often laugh, cry, sometimes pretty vigorously doing this work, and then they feel totally fine. Because it's again, the emotion, like you were saying, are related to what they're releasing, and they're trapped in the body, and that they, self-regulation means that we always encourage people to be responsible for their own well-being, so that because this is not, neither TRE nor neurogenic yoga are cathartic form of releases, they're not. So we want to keep it as pleasant. Sometimes there might be some unpleasant emotion, but we want to keep it as manageable and comfortable as possible, a gentle release, so that's when the body can, and the mind and everything in the being can integrate. Otherwise, it's just there is the risk of re-traumatization. I mean,
well, I was thinking in the particular case of PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, and the veterans coming, and there's so much talk about it in this moment, and such a big need to serve these individuals. I was wondering if the very fact of the tremor sometimes cannot be triggering of situations or traumatic situations, or even the traumatic response that they had while they were in war, where the tremor appeared as a natural thing after an attack or after a bombing or something like that, and then by asking the body to tremor again, whether that could not reactivate the trauma.
Well, that's an interesting question. I haven't worked with a lot of soldiers myself, although I work with many people with PTSD, because it can be created by a lot of other reasons. However, David...
There are many wars.
Exactly. David has been working with thousands of soldiers, and what he says is, first of all, what is interesting, he says that post-traumatic stress disorder is a wrong name for it, because disorder is implying some form of mental illness that requires the use of medication and the assistance of a psychiatrist, okay? While he said in all of these people that I work with who had PTSD from war, there was only a handful that needed a psychiatrist. All the other ones, they needed to release this incredibly pent-up tension that they had. His experience, and again, because I don't have a lot of personal experience, but I listen to him a lot, his experience is that telling the story is actually what risk to bring. There is more risk in the telling of the story or creating a re-traumatization, while the tremors themselves, if they are facilitated in a skillful way, they tend to give the body another option. Basically, the option of creating a new neural pathway in the body, and instead of going to flooding or freezing or dissociating, to go instead to a place, make an healthier choice that happens in the body. So his experience is that it's rare that that happens, and even when
trauma would be re-triggered.
Exactly, and he's very, of course, very skillful on facilitating the sessions.
And Maria, have you perceived any difference in regards to how men and women react to your neurogenic yoga?
Well, first of all, like in all yoga, there is a majority of women
Here
here
and now.
and now. But it will change. It is changing actually rapidly, but still there is a majority of women at this point.
Yeah.
No.
But I mean, in terms of the acceptance or the permission to go into tremors, you know, because I would imagine that women would be perhaps more comfortable because precisely of the stigma you were talking about before, that trembling is associated with weakness and with fear, and men don't want to be casted that way. So I just thought perhaps.
Well, no, I haven't noticed that, but it's also, if you think about it, people that come, men that come to those workshops, they are generally ready for it. They are open-minded. But even, I will say, even when in private session, when people come to me for this, and sometimes they are men, no, I haven't noticed a lot of. I think it's also again depending on the container that I create.
Well, of course, yes.
But or the teacher creates. It's not me.
And the case and the person. Now, you have also taught the neurogenic yoga in other parts of the world.
I've taught TRE in other
But not
parts
neurogenic yoga.
Well, wait a second. Well, Canada, if we can call it another part
Well,
of the
it is
world.
another part of the world.
It's the same part of
It's
the
not
world,
the
it's a
state.
different country.
You've been mentioning mainly how the tremors happen in the body and how they relate to body release and to an instinctual body posture or reaction. But you've also been talking about the mind. So how do these two relate in terms of neurogenic yoga? How?
Interesting question. So the tremors, and I mean the reaction or contraction come from the brainstem and the mammalian brain. The cortex, which is the part which is mostly developed and the one that we most of the time we operate from the cortex, is the one where the ego reside, and is also the part that where the stories are formed, okay? So psychology is really dealing with the cortex, while this work is neurophysiological work, so it's dealing with the way that the brain is making sense of what's happening in relation to the anatomy. So that's a very big difference, because when something happens and we react, the cortex is hijacked by the irrational brain, because that is what is supposed to keep us alive. So it needs, the cortex is the slow kid in town, you know, it's always a couple of seconds behind. Because let's say that we see something, we are in the forest and we see something, you know, we don't go like, oh, is it a snake or is it a stick? Hello, we jump, we immediately react. And then we go, oh, it was just a stick. But if it was a snake, we might be dead, okay? So that's overriding the cortex. And then the PTSD is exactly what it is. The primitive part of the brains are activated and they cannot calm down. in a couple of simple words.
Yeah.
So in order to calm them down, we have to deactivate them. And the tremor, that's what they're doing. The tremors are deactivating the overcharge in the primitive part of the brain so that the cortex can kick in again. So I'll give you an example. This guy was a soldier, actually, that worked with David. And he was in Afghanistan, he was at the head of the convoy. He was the guy driving the first truck. So that's a very stressful job, okay? He made it with his skin back home. And driving on the freeway, of course, he was very stressed out. And driving on the freeway in LA, a kid, a few cars ahead of him, threw a red baseball cap out of his window of the car, and the cap landed in front of this guy's car. Now, if this would happen to you or me, we would just drive over it. It's a cap. You couldn't do that because there was
of course, an association.
An association. So red danger road driving, and he had to drive. He couldn't drive over it. He'd drive around it and cause an accident because he wasn't thinking clearly. So basically, when the primitive part of the brains are activated, we cannot think clearly with the cortex. And so all that, both the activation and the tremors come from the primitive part of the brain. So they are below the level of consciousness. So the mind is really, I mean, the mind in the common sense of how we use it, the cortex, is really taking the passenger seat in this work. Does it make sense? So
it
basically,
does. I'm sure he doesn't like it.
Psychology.
I'm sure he doesn't like it.
I'm sure he doesn't like it.
He doesn't like to take the back seat.
And that's why when people are experiencing this work for the first time, we want to reassure them, you know, that this is okay. It's all right. Because they go, it's weird. Yeah, of course it's weird, but where does that come from? That judgment is definitely a mind judgment. It's not coming from your body. Because no matter what your mind thinks or what kind of labels or judgment it puts on this work, your body loves it. Because it's like, oh yeah, finally, you know, I can let go of some of this stuff.
And Maria, do you include the spirit in your neurogenic yoga in any way?
Well, the spiritual, I mean, not in an overt way, meaning I don't talk about it unless it's a training in a class. But if you think about it, dealing with our trauma, with our own trauma, is our spiritual path. So by processing the stuff that happened to me and making peace with it and integrate it in a way that I can be whole again, is part of everybody's spiritual path. Like to deal with our family that we were given is part of our spiritual path. So there is definitely that component. And another component is also that the big, let's say, people like Gandhi or Martin Luther King or my personal hero Nelson Mandela, what is the difference between these people that are almost considered superhumans? They're not, you know. The difference is that in a spiritual way, instead of running away from their pain and suffering, they use it as a fuel, as compost to create a new world. So they came up with some great concept, the revolution, the way that they were living in their society and still affecting us to this day. I'm also an activist. I've been to big demonstrations and, you know, and the words of Gandhi and Nelson Mandela are, I mean, Martin Luther King, you know, non-violence and civic disobedience are still very common and used and modern. So their message, we are all like them if we can, instead of running away from our pain and challenge it, dive right into it and use it to transform.
To transform.
And to grow. And that's what we call evolution.
So ultimately, the objective of your neurogenic yoga is to help people grow.
Yes. And to, I mean, again, as an activist, this is a new form of activism for me. I mean, when you help people release their trauma and they can think clearer and they can become more compassionate, because once we feel connected, if I feel at home in my own body and in my own skin, it will be easier for me to feel a connection with everybody else. It will be harder for me to hurt others. because I will see them like my brothers.
Yes.
So the more connected I am with my body, because I release all the tension and stress, the more I can be connected to you and to everybody else. And then really, this is what peace is. So it is a way to change the world.
And it is a way to change the internal world against inner terrorism and inner oppression, and because all these traumatic experiences certainly terrorize people, and many times, they're very, very oppressive, and so it's interesting that you use that as your new form of activism.
Yes, because I grew tired of the other one because it didn't seem to be very effective at this point in history.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Maria, in this quest of your use of neurogenic yoga to help individuals grow, if you were to pinpoint one aspect of yoga that you think is the most useful for you or the most important when you are teaching and when you are considering how to help an individual, what would that aspect of yoga be?
Acceptance.
Tell me more.
With what is. We all tend, we want something different than what we have. I mean, a lot of what the yoga practice, I mean, if you think about it, yoga was born to help people be able to sit like we are and meditate. That was the very beginning of the practice. So the physical part was just the tip of the iceberg. It was about being able to be whole, being able to be calm, and be able to just sit and do nothing and be at peace. So this is so difficult in society because we have, like you were saying, the inner terrorism going on all the time, and the inner demons and fears and comparison and jealousy and desires and
you name it.
Exactly.
As
so
they say.
Acceptance of what is. A little bit the word of Byron Katie. If I can do that, and yoga definitely help us do that. That's for me the main aspect, because everything else is, if you don't have that,
yeah, absolutely,
then you will never be at peace.
Would you say that this creation of yours had helped you accept yourself and the world better as well?
Most definitely. And also being more, less reactive. I tend, I'm Italian, I'm very fiery, and I tend to be aggressive. I used to be aggressive, but now it takes a lot to weak me out.
A lot of tremors. Okay. And a lot of tremors it took you to come to this place of managing the aggression. So, Maria, thank you very much. Thanks for accepting my invitation to come to the show, and thanks for sharing with us your great work. How would people get in touch with you if they want to do that?
People can get in touch to me through our two websites. One is the trecalifornia.com, otherwise neurogenicyoga.com that I share with my partner Jenica Mills. And also they can call me, 831-462-1846.
Tell us the number again.
831-462-1846.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Maria. I wish you the best and that you continue helping people and yourself. And thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you. Namaste, Antonio.
Namaste. My guest today was Maria Alfaro. Maria is a native Italian living in Santa Cruz, California. She has studied yoga with Rodney Yee, Anna Forrest, and Scott Blossom, and is also trained in Tai Chi and Qigong. Her training in trauma release exercises, or TRE, with his founder, bioenergetics therapist David Berceli, led her to create Yoga and TRE, workshops where she uses yoga to prepare individuals for the practice of the TRE exercises, and also Neurogenic Yoga, an integrative method that combines the healing benefits of yoga with Dr. Berceli's development of neurogenic tremors. I hope you like our show today. And if you care to let me know, shoot me an email at antonio@yogiviews.com. I look forward to seeing you the next time